Was there any kind of incident that you can remember?
To this day, I don't know what started it. And the person to blame is sitting right across from you. That's the only person. Not parents, not society, not pornography. I mean, those are just excuses.
In the late 1980s and early 1990s, homophobia was especially rampant in North America. Following the prominent HIV/AIDS crisis in the early 80s, anti-queer attitudes and perspectives were becoming more and more prevalent within all aspects of society. At the intersection of sexuality and race, we will tap into the extreme and complex dangers of a system built with racism and homophobia. From the years 1987 to 1991, infamous serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer took the lives of 17 men, 15 of which were gay, BIPOC men. Dahmer has been known to possess characteristics of cannibalism and morbid consumption. Because of the rising fear and prejudice towards queer people in society, many people viewed the Dahmer case as a means to associate morbid activity, murder, and cannibalism with homosexuality and queerness. This idea ultimately created a society in which all queer people are viewed to be dangerous and similar to the likes of Dahmer himself. Additionally, there are traces of internalized homophobia within Dahmer. Some even go as far as believing that his own shame with his sexuality was enough for him to want to kill other homosexual men. Many of Dahmer's murders took place in the north side of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which was and is predominantly African American. During, but not exclusive to this time, black areas were subject to over-policing, and queerness was viewed as sexual deviance, which was an arrestable cause. It was evident that the police often demonstrated an all-or-nothing attention span when it came to queer and BIPOC people, being either unreasonable and irrational with surveillance, or stepping completely out of the radar due to discomfort and unnerved with what they viewed as unnatural. Dangerously, a very detrimental impact of the Dahmer crimes being so topical in the 90s was the fact that many people now associated grim and sexual crime with queerness, fueling fear, prejudice, and hate. The media began to, if not explicitly, implicitly say that the cause of Dahmer's behavior was due to his homosexuality. Interestingly, many reports of the time referred to the crimes as homosexual overkill. This term was very heavily protested by LGBT activists, as they argued that, quote, Dahmer's actions were no more representatively homosexual than a heterosexual serial killer's killings would be representatively heterosexual.
Netflix has dropped the LGBTQ tag from its latest original series, which we just played the trailer of, Dahmer Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, after backlash online from that tag. One Twitter user wrote, I mean, I know it's technically true, but this is not the representation we're looking for.
Scholars who have looked deeply into the murders are also led to believe that Dahmer's own internalized homophobia was a portion of his motivation to kill other gay men, adding another layer to the already overly complex case study. The Racialization of Sexuality, The Queer Case of Jeffrey Dahmer, by Ian Bernard, states that it is very possible that Dahmer's own shame and guilt in his sexuality drove him to his murderous actions. Similar to a vast amount of predominantly black neighborhoods in America, the police, health, and emergency services in Dahmer's Milwaukee neighborhood would often neglect cases in which people of color or queer people were involved. Some reports even claim that police officers of the time would intentionally and entirely ignore calls from dispatch if they were aware that a colored or queer person had anything to do with the call. In accounts from Dahmer himself, he speaks of the methodical ways in which he committed crimes. While discussing his past upon being arrested, he was noted to have an impeccable memory and able to recall extremely specific details, not just about the murders themselves, but the strategic fashion in which he committed them.
Coming back from the shopping mall back in '78, I had fantasies about picking up a hitchhiker and taking him back to the house and having complete control and dominance over him.
Having targeted black and gay men, The police very much neglected the reported disappearances of the victims and ignored many calls from his black Oxford apartment neighbors regarding the obscene noises and smells coming from Dahmer's
A
room.
Milwaukee police officer connected to the Jeffrey Dahmer case retired today. John Balsersack and his partner were fired from MPD and later reinstated. They returned 14-year-old Conorak Synthesim phone to Dahmer back in 1991. The boy had escaped Dahmer's apartment naked and bleeding. Dahmer told the officers the boy was an adult and his lover and that he was drunk. The 14-year-old was later killed. Dahmer was arrested several months later.
In another case, a man by the name of Tracy Edwards was drinking with his friends in an alley when he was approached by Dahmer. After speaking for a few moments, Dahmer was then able to convince Edwards to come back to his place, watch a movie, and take nude photos in exchange for money. Testimonies from Edwards state that Dahmer placed handcuffs on his hands and threatened to eat his heart. After several hours of enduring his disturbing and possessive behavior, Edwards fled Dahmer's apartment and came across a patrol car. After flagging it down, he explained to the officers that Dahmer had tried to murder him. The officers stated that they had initial suspicions of Edwards himself, as he was a black man with handcuffs running through the streets. With these situations considered, it is clear and evident that institutional homophobia made Dahmer's victims more accessible to him, and thereby enabling the mass murders of several individuals. While reading and looking into this topic, I found that while it was disturbing and often unsettling, I believe that it is an important area of queer history that is often overlooked. The complexities and layers of the Dahmer case are often not spotlighted in education due to the gruesome and horrid details that surround it, though the complex aspects are in stark contrast with the surface-level ideas that society already holds for homophobia. As a growing and changing society, it is up to us to ensure that our bigotries and our prejudices do not turn us blind to both the extreme and non-extreme injustices and horrors.
If you were out on the street now, would you still be committing the crimes?
Probably. If this hadn't happened, there's no doubt I probably would be. I can't think of anything that would have stopped me.